Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is William Bell. I want to continue in section number 3 of our study from Ezekiel chapter 7. And we're going to pick up on verse 20 and see if we can work our way through the end of the chapter. I want to welcome those of you who may be new to this channel so that you will go ahead and subscribe to it by hitting that red button. And if for any reason you have not rung my bell, you did not ring my bell, go ahead and do that. That's the little bell beneath the subscribe button that will allow you to get a notification every time we do a new video. And that way you won't miss out on anything. So we want to encourage you to do that. So now we have been talking about several things. We've been talking about time and how God views time, whether it's through when he writes about time for man in these time prophecies. Is he writing in a time that man cannot understand, or in a language that man cannot understand, or that was not for man to perceive and comprehend? Or is he writing about time from man's perspective so man can understand when these things would be done? Secondly, and as we look at how God uses these time words, we were also making some comparisons in the New Testament and looking at some similarities. Thirdly, we talked about the day of judgment as it is mentioned here, and we looked at the times, or we were going to consider the times of the Gentiles, which we'll get a chance to look at in this particular video. In addition, the phrase, "Then you shall know that I am the Lord," which he uses when he's doing these judgments in order to declare that he is in their presence, in their midst, or that he is bringing a judgment to let them know that he is the only true and living God. And because of the judgment that he brings, there is no one else who could have brought such destruction and tragedy upon them. And then we will look at, we touched on a little bit in the last video, which was the concept of shame, contempt, etc., humiliation, because they are defeated and because they are put down. Now, let's go ahead and take a look. Starting in verse 20, he says, "As for the beauty of his ornaments, he set it in the majesty. He set it in majesty, but they made from it the images of their abominations." Now, if you will read chapter 8, once again, as I mentioned before, you will see the abominations that Israel committed before God brought the judgment upon them. They're detestable things. Therefore, I have made it like refuse to them. I will give it, verse 21, as plunder into the hands of strangers. So the very things that they had made, their images of gold and silver and wood and stone, God says, I'm going to give all that to your enemies, to people who can appreciate worshiping these idols and who think that there's something to them. I'm going to let them have your treasured gods, if you please. And then he says, and to the wicked of the earth as spoil. So all of those things are going to be given up. And, you know, they valued these gods. They were made out of silver and gold, etc. So they were valuable in the sense of these precious metals and these carvings that they made, just like we would put value on artwork, etc. And God says, I'm going to take these gods whom you think so much of because you think so little of me, God is saying to them, and I'm going to give them to your enemies, who will plunder you and who will take them as their spoil. Then he says, and they shall defile it. I will turn my face from them, verse 22, and they will defile my secret place, for robbers shall enter it and defile it. Now he's talking about these foreign nations who are coming in to enter into the temple, God's secret place, his place behind the veil. But notice he prefaces that with saying, I will turn my face from them. That is an indication that God's presence is no longer with them, that his favor is no longer upon them. It's not like God is, eyeballing them and looking into their eyes, or they're looking into his eyes or his literal face. No, they don't see God's literal face. He's in the tabernacle. He's in the most holy place as far as his representative presence is concerned. And remember, that was off limits to everyone in Israel but the high priest, who could only go in once a year under the penalty of death. So they didn't get a chance to see what was behind the veil. They didn't get a chance to see God's glory from that perspective. And so when it says they would see God's face, that means his presence among them. All right. That is his favor toward them when they see his face. It represents covenantal approval and not some literal seeing God face to face, as futurists would like to make these prophecies, and which is why they can't understand many of what the prophecies that God has given. All right, so in verse 23, he says, make a chain, for the land is filled with crimes of blood, and the city is full of violence. Therefore, I will bring the worst of the Gentiles. Now, when he says make a chain, this chain is to put around their necks. It is to put around their legs. It is to put around their arms to carry them off into captivity as the prisoners of God. That's what the chains are for. And so he says, make a chain, for the land is filled with crimes of blood, and the city is full of violence. Therefore, I will bring the worst of the Gentiles. Now, this is the times of the Gentiles for Israel back during the time, and of course, this is Judah, but back during the time of the Babylonian captivity. The Gentiles was Nebuchadnezzar and his allies who came to destroy Israel, to destroy the southern kingdom of Judah. And so that's what he calls the times of the Gentiles. The times of the Gentiles is not where Gentiles, are in the world today, and we say the Gentiles are ruling the world, and some future coming is going to come, and that's going to end the time of the Gentiles. No, it was when they came to war against Israel to put them into captivity, to defeat them by the sword, to cause pestilence and famine, etc., because they had surrounded them. So those were the times of the Gentiles. And primarily it means active military engagement. It's an active war that's going on with them. These are what he calls the times of the Gentiles, or the worst of the Gentiles is what's alluded here, meaning a time of the Gentiles. And he says, and they will possess their houses. I will cause the pomp of the strong to cease. The people who had the means and the, what did we call it? Discretionary income to have the parties and all the lush activities, etc. Whereas the poor people could do nothing but work and feed themselves, by their fingers and to the bone, working themselves to the bone. Well, the people who had the money, the people who had the resources, the people who were affluent, these are the people where he says, I will cause the pomp of the strong to cease. The people who were in power, etc. I'm going to cause their pomp, as we use the term pomp in circumstance, I'm going to cause that to cease, and their holy places shall be defiled. So all these places on the hills where they worshiped, all these secret inner places where they worshiped, etc., and gave homage to their false gods, he says, I am going to defile their secret places. So we're going to bring these Gentiles, this army of Nebuchadnezzar and the rest, and they're going to invade all of these places as well. Verse 25, destruction comes. They will seek peace, but there shall be none. What is peace? Peace is from a term that means the absence of war. It means the presence of security and also the presence of prosperity. When you have all three of those things, you have peace. So you can't just talk about, and it's just like, when America goes into war against some of these other countries, like Iraq, for example. Well, they go in and they destroy Iraq, and then they stop warring, they stop destroying. Well, does Iraq have peace? No. Why? Because their country lies in ruins. Then they may secure their country by, let's say they set up walls around the country. They probably don't use brick walls like they did back in these olden times. So they get some kind of security defense to protect them from any future invasions. But that's still not peace. They're not at peace until their people prosper, until their economy is restored and the people are able to live and thrive and enjoy themselves, as well as achieve their dreams and their goals in life and accomplish the things that they need and want to accomplish for themselves. Their self-determination is restored. That's what peace is all about. So it's not just ending a war, but it is providing the security to prevent further attack and devastation of them, but also to provide prosperity for them. And so that's the true meaning of peace. And when you don't have those things, then you do not have peace. And so he says disaster will come upon disaster, and rumor will be upon rumor. So they're going to have disaster upon disaster. It's not just going to be one event that destroys them. They're just going to keep, as they say, when trouble comes, when it rains, it pours. Well, they're going to have rain. It's going to be pouring, and they're going to have thunderstorms and everything else in terms of the bad weather of war and destruction and devastation among them. And so disaster will come upon disaster, and rumor will be upon rumor. They will seek a vision from a prophet. This is when everybody starts trying to turn to God. When everything has gone, haywire, they've lost all of their values. Their homes are destroyed. Their life is ransacked. They have no security. They're living, from day to day, trying to decide if we're going to eat today or whatever the situation is going to be. And they just don't have any stability in their lives whatsoever. It's in turmoil, kind of like what we're hearing in the news about Venezuela at this time because of what's happening there, and could be worse. And what we're seeing in other countries where war has gone in and where they're destroying these countries. And so this is what the people are living in. Their lives, it's a threat to them every day when they wake up that there could possibly be some destruction among them. And then he says, but the law will perish from the priest and counsel from the elders. They're not going to have any good words to tell you. They can't tell you anything because God has departed from them. He's not going to inspire them and give them words of encouragement anymore because he's bringing this destruction on them through his agents or army, the Babylonians. Verse 27, the king will mourn. The prince will be clothed in desolation. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to literally wear a garment of desolation. No, he's going to be clothed with all the desolation that's going on around him. And the hands of the common people will tremble. Everybody will be shaken. All right. And you know how when there's so much fear around, you're so afraid, your hands just tremble and just shake, kind of like people who are so elderly, when you see, elderly people, sometimes it's easy for them to be afraid and to tremble and shake, or just because their muscle tissue is not as firm as it used to be when they were young, and you see them shaking. He says everybody's going to be trembling here. The hands of the common people, the people who labor, the people who work, the people who have the muscular build, etc., because of their hard labor. He says they're going to be trembling. I will do to them according to their way. This is God saying, I'm going to render to everyone according to his works. We've touched on that a little bit from Matthew 16, 27 and 28 to show you a comparison of it in the New Testament when he said that the Son of Man will come in the glory of his angels. He was about to come in the glory of his angels, the glory of his Father with his holy angels, and then he would reward each one according to his works. Assuredly, I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in power and great glory. And then finally, and according to what they deserve, I will judge them. Notice, just as in Matthew 16, 27 and 28, the Son of Man is about to come in the glory of his Father with his holy angels, and then he would reward each according to his works. What is he doing? He's about to judge them. He says, and according to what they deserve, I will judge them. Then what happens? Then they will know that I am the Lord. When all of these things come upon them, when God brings all this destruction, this calamity, this humiliation, this shame, this destruction of their society, ending all that they were accustomed to. So now they have to live like people who despair every single moment of their lives, with no security, no protection. This is what he says would demonstrate to them that he was the true God, that he controls all things, and that when this happened, they would finally say, I know the Lord. Then shall they know that I am the Lord. They were not going to see his eyeballs. They were not going to see his literal face. They would see him through the events. And that is the way God manifests himself in these judgments. So what have we looked at? We've looked at time, and we shared that in the first two videos. We talked about how God used the time. And I'm going to do one more video on this little series to show you what God has to say when people want to disregard his message on time. And we showed you some similarities in the New Testament. Now we've demonstrated the times of the Gentiles is active military engagement. It's war. It's the time when they're being judged in war. And this phrase about the humility and the shame that they suffer when God has departed from them and he has left them open without protection to be plundered by their enemies, to be destroyed, killed by the sword, and shut up with famine and pestilence inside their own city, and they can't get out, and it becomes a prison to them and a death trap and a graveyard. And this is what happened to them. And then finally, he says, when all this takes place, then shall you know that I am the Lord. Now, you know, God could have just came down and said, look, here I am. You know what? I truly believe if God did that, some people would not believe. How do I know? Because Jesus Christ came, stood right in front of people, told them who he was. They did not believe. There is no proof, no assurance that you would accept God if you saw him. Because if you don't have the faith, and you know, they asked that at the time Jesus was talking to them when he gave this parable in Luke 16 about the rich man and Lazarus. And the rich man says, you know, let one of my brethren go and tell them so that they don't come to this place. And he says, maybe, you know, if somebody would rise from the dead. Here's what the Lord told him. He says, if they do not believe Moses and the prophets, in other words, if they don't believe what is written, if they can't accept the Bible, if they can't accept what is written in the scriptures, they will not accept a man even though he rose from the dead. Look how many people do not believe in Jesus Christ. Look at how many people who refuse. He has risen from the dead, and they still do not believe in him. So there's no guarantee that if you look God straight in the face, that you would accept him. Because if you reject his word, that is proof that you will not accept him. That's why he's done all these marvelous things in the world, so that his invisible presence can be known by the things which are seen, by the things that he has testified in the scripture that he has done. And all that requires of you is the faith to believe in what he has said. So I hope that you will take these messages from Ezekiel chapter 7, look at them carefully and see how God uses the language, and then take the lessons you learn from the way he uses the language and apply it to the prophecies in the New Testament. And then you will see how God's presence is manifested among the deeds and judgments which are done there. That's the message that we wanted to bring you in this little short series. I also want to encourage you once again to subscribe to our channel. We publish videos pretty much on a regular basis. And so make sure that you hit the red button and then hit the bell, ring the bell, if you please, ring my bell, so that you'll get a notification. Visit our website at allthingsfulfilled.com. In addition to that, we want you to tune in to our broadcast, KWAM 990 AM, 107.9 FM. If you're in the Memphis, Shelby County, Tupelo, Mississippi, Forest City, Little Rock, and West Memphis and Jonesboro, Arkansas, you can tune into that on the radio, or you can join in with us on Facebook Live. You even have the opportunity to ask a question and engage in the study. We also have a television program on the Now Network that airs for 30 minutes every Saturday at 6:30 p.m. Central, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Check out the Now Network. It's one of the fastest growing Christian networks that is out there today online, and also on cable TV. So with that, I'm William Bell, saying to you, have a very blessed and awesome day in the Lord. Study his word. Don't take our word, but get in the book, read it, and see if the things that we tell you are not so. We do our best to give it to you straight from the scriptures. And I trust and pray that if you will study them and research them, you will see the truth of these matters. Until next time, you have a great one. We'll be back with another video very soon.